These two disciples are making their way from Jerusalem to a small village on Easter Sunday. These things have all just happened. Their minds are reeling. They don't yet know how to process it. When they're even describing to Jesus, whom they don't recognize, what the heck has been going on, they use those kind of terms. Well, we don't know. There seems to be some confusion. We saw him put to death. The tomb is empty. Angels, people are saying they saw him, but we just don't know. On the one hand, it seems like total failure. On the other hand, it seems like complete confusion. And here these disciples, for whatever reason, are leaving Jerusalem in the midst of all of that. And they're going with a heavy heart. Their eyes are downcast. They probably feel like the rug has just been ripped out from under them. That everything they thought they knew about Jesus is false. It didn't turn out the way they thought it would. Maybe they came to Jerusalem because they knew Jesus was entering into Jerusalem on that Palm Sunday. And maybe for them, that was going to be the great manifestation of the Messiah. And so they were with him all week. And then that week ended in failure. It ended in crucifixion and everybody turning against him. And so now they're leaving Jerusalem, going back home to their old lives. And Jesus encounters them, but he's not recognizable. And this is so common in the resurrection stories, that there's something different about Jesus. On the one hand, we know the disciples don't expect to see him, and so they don't. I've met some of you in the grocery store. You walk right by me, and you don't even see me because you don't expect to see me in Walmart or in Hy-Vee or whatever, especially if my collar isn't visible or if I'm in disguise. You're out of context, and that's not the person you expect to find. They don't expect to see Jesus, so he can walk right up to them, and they don't see him. But also, there's something new about Jesus. In his resurrected body, though it's the same body with the wounds on his hands and feet and side, nevertheless, there's something renewed about it. There's something more spiritual about it. And so they don't recognize this new look that he is sporting. And yet, Jesus begins opening the scriptures. And there's a funny phrase in here that he says to them, "Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer in order to enter into his glory?" Now, you and I might think, of course, that's exactly what we've always been taught. We've always heard the gospel story. We know it inside and out. Yes, of course, Jesus. Those two disciples were so blockheaded. And yet, when I was kind of doing some research on this passage, I found that Luke's gospel is the only place in the entire scriptures, Old Testament and New Testament, that ever speaks of a suffering Messiah. That is not what the Jewish people expected. The Messiah in the Old Testament is always predicted to be a great king, a great warrior, a great ruler, a great liberator, someone who is going to lead from captivity into freedom. Never is the word Messiah and suffering put together. That's not what they expect. And this is, I think, what most of Jesus' disciples expected, that when he was believed to be the Messiah, he would not be a suffering Messiah. Their image was something totally different. And so when they saw him rejected and humiliated and crucified and buried, he could not be the Messiah, because that's not what a Messiah is. And so you even hear them today. We even thought he was a prophet, not a Messiah. The prophets were always put to death. The Messiah would not be. So when Jesus says this line, it is striking. Did you not know that the Messiah was supposed to suffer and die? And the answer is no, we didn't. That's not what our religion has taught us. So what Jesus does is he goes back through the scriptures and he points out the hidden realities when it's talking about the suffering servant of God, when it's talking about how God himself led his people out of slavery into freedom, when it talked all about the prophets and the great patriarchs of old, Jesus is showing them that they are all signs of the kind of Messiah that will come. In other words, God doesn't do anything differently. He just keeps magnifying the same thing over and over again. So now that you've seen all of this, isn't it right that the Messiah himself should have suffered and died? Blows their mind. And they're just like, something then ignites within their hearts and their souls. Like they've just seen something for the first time. Something they've known their entire life has all of a sudden been made new. This is what Jesus does. He takes old things and he renews them. Our opening prayer declared that we pray, Lord, for that youthfulness of spirit always. Make us new. No matter how long we have been Catholic or Christian or a believer, make it new. Help me to see things that I haven't seen before. Let me know mysteries about you that are yet unknown to me. There's always excitement. There's always something more to find. And there's always something surprising. Just when we think we have God all figured out and what his plan is for our lives, whoosh, it all turns around and becomes new. And there are things we didn't know. And when we find those things out, our hearts are renewed. This is why we can keep going in faith, like those disciples just kept going with Jesus, learning more and more and more, until the moment when they get to that table and the Lord breaks the bread for them. Again, something new. He had only done that a few times. In the multiplication of the loaves and fishes, the great miracle that was impressed upon everyone's minds, and of course the Last Supper, when he broke the bread and gave it as his body. And indeed, that's exactly what the disciples saw right then and there. They saw his body. So even though they were walking with his body and talking to his body this entire time, they didn't see his body. They didn't see him. But as soon as the bread was broken, they saw his body in that. And this body vanished from their sight. That was the body that he wanted them to realize. That was the new body that he was presenting to them. Something very old from their Passover history has been made something new, the God who would be with them always. And that immediately encourages them to run back and speak to the disciples in the upper room. And what a dangerous journey they would have had to make, because now the sun had set. It was night, and they had 7 miles to get back to Jerusalem in pitch dark, in dangerous times. They risked their lives to get back to Jerusalem to tell the apostles they had seen Jesus, and they know him alive. This is what happens in faith. When we believe, all of a sudden, we are put into darkness, and we walk in darkness because we know Jesus is with us. And I can go through the darkness. I don't have to see. I don't have to touch or hear. I just know him, and my heart is on fire. That changes everything. Last night, I had a little glimpse of this when I confirmed 11 young people, and I'll confirm more at the next Mass at 11 o'clock. And as I'm sitting here looking at them after confirmation, and the light hit them, their face is glowing with the oil on their heads. You can see the glow of the cross on the newly confirmed foreheads. The church does what she does for a reason, because what is seen outward is what is inward. The cross is glowing upon your countenance. The cross is glowing on you who believe. And when you take that out into the world, it makes everything new. So, like those disciples, you are invited to come to the table today to witness the breaking of the bread, to see the risen Jesus, and to remember that the glow of the cross is on you. So when you go out into the darkness, do not be afraid. Take that light with you. Jesus is not the Messiah who's going to change the world. He is the Messiah that is going to change you.